So we live.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Biologically Speaking. We apologize for the technical issues that we faced today, and we are starting a little bit late, but we are so glad that you can join us on YouTube, on Zoom, wherever you're joining us from. Welcome to Biologically Speaking. Today, we are really excited to have here on our platform with us Dr. Ipsa Jain. She is a science visualizer and an educator. So she is a PhD in molecular biology from the Indian Institute of Science, and she then transitioned into science illustration, and she did a postdoc in the Institute of Stem Cell Biology and Regenerative Medicine, where she worked on visualizing science for a wider audience using a picture book. Today, she's going to talk about science communication, illustrating science, science art, and we are really excited to have with us here. Currently, she is a faculty at the Srishti Manipal Institute of Art, Design, and Technology. So with that, the stage is for you, Ipsa, and we're looking forward to this journey about science illustration. Thank
All right.
I'll just have a small announcement. If you have any questions for us, please use the chat box. And yeah, that's it. Over to you, Ipsa. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Rupkatha. Good evening, and thanks for those who are watching it on a Sunday. I mean, I appreciate that you're taking time out on a weekend to be here. So what I'm going to do today is just give me a second. I'm just trying to figure out my slide deck and my possibilities of sharing it. Just give me a second. So what I'm going to do today is talk about the work that I did during my postdoc, which resulted in a picture book this year. So our book came out. This is a self-published project. The book is called Actually Colors Speak. It's co-authored by Minaj Sirajuddin and myself. Minaj Sirajuddin is the principal investigator. He runs the cytoskeleton lab at INSTEM, where I did my postdoc. And what I hope to do today is tell you a little bit about myself, but mostly about the process of making this book, what kind of things went into making this book, and why we made the kind of choices we made to make this a better science communication project than we may have imagined previously. All right. So just sharing a little bit about myself. Like Rupata mentioned, I started out as a run-of-the-mill scientist. I was a molecular biologist, but towards the end of the PhD, I was very certain that that's not what I want to necessarily continue. And at that point of time, I was still looking for things and ideas and possibilities. One of the pivotal experiences I had was where I collaborated with two dancer friends, and we, and a larger community, and we created this dance piece around the ecology of a fig, and we presented it during a conference. And the response we had there from the audience was very emotional, and that sort of was a light bulb moment, which made me realize that art can storytell science and in a way that moves people, engages them. And at that point, I started drawing. I was already drawing. And then I wanted to bring the idea of storytelling and science and public together. And the other thing I used to do at that time was to talk to other artists within India and across the globe who were or are still working at the intersections of science and art to understand how do they think about their work, how do they do things. and use that opportunity to learn from them. The most interesting, most productive and fruitful, lucky possibility here was this postdoctoral fellowship at INSTEM. So there we did a lot of projects which were apart from the book. So we also worked on this idea of how can we use and how drawing can become part of the scientific process itself. That was also a great project. And at that time itself, I also started training students, working with other students, young scientists, on ideas of science illustration, and training them also helped me improve my own ideas around it better. And I started building a body of work as zines. I also talk a lot about zines in some, in other forums and other possibilities. So zines are, I've co-opted zines as a medium to talk about science, and that's become my science communication tool, really. And I also work and collaborate with other scientists and institutes to make zines, videos, images, and so on. Um, and as Rupkata mentioned, I'm currently a visual communication faculty at the Srishti Manipal Institute. Okay, just give me. Okay, this is weird. I'm unable to. Sorry, give me a second. Somehow I'm unable to move my slides if I try. Okay. Hopefully this stays on properly. So what I'm going to do now is just take you through the idea of making this book. And I'm going to cover that in 3 sections. First is the making of ideas, then the making of images, and the words. So these are the people who made the book. This is Minaj and this is myself. And we also had 2 other collaborators who joined us towards the end of the project to help us, sort of loosen all the ends and tie a bow to the project. Robin Jacob was worked with us as a book designer, and Somlata Karak worked with us as an editor of the book. So the first question we might ask is, why a book? Um, uh, at the onset of our collaboration, Minaja and I knew that we were going to make a book. It of course came from the idea that we both liked books as a medium. Uh, I particularly collect a lot of children's book and some picture books as well. Um, so science communication, especially when it comes to books, tends to focus around astronomy and ecological sciences and some evolution and environmental issues, all legit topics worth talking about. So we thought that it would also be cool to introduce something new, which is the microscopic world, southern molecular biology in all its glory and glamour, in a popular science book. Um, and then we had to think about what kind of topic would we pick. So we wanted to pick something that is relatable at the scale that we might see and experience it, and would also have a body of scientific work that allows us to understand what really happens at the cellular and the molecular scale. And coloration in animals came as, sort of the right answer to that thinking process. And once we knew that this was our topic, then we had to kind of think about what in this would we talk about. Um, all right. Is someone else who, right. So whenever somebody enters the room, I'm not able to move my slides. Can you figure out how to manage that? Whoever is the other co-host of the Zoom.
Yeah, is it, it's not going to the next slide, right?
Yeah, okay, let
Can
me
you
try it.
just share your screen once again?
Yeah. Yeah, so whenever somebody wants to enter the room, because I'm also a co-host, it shows up.
I guess, yes, that's what's happening.
And then I lose the control for right.
Yes. Is it working now?
I mean, it's working now. It works until somebody decides that they want to
Yes,
join
I
the
know. I know.
room.
Yeah.
Uh,
I'll see what I can do about it here.
yeah, thank you. Um, all right. So once we decided that coloration in animals was going to be our subject of study, we did a lot of reading. We looked at animal behavior work. We looked at cell and molecular biology work. We looked at very high resolution microscopy images, and we tried to compile as much images as we could. Um, all right. Okay, now I've run into the same problem again. Okay, no, maybe not. Right. So after a lot of studying, we figured out what are the stories we want to tell, and in what order shape might appear in the book. And that process also took a lot of time and a lot of iterations. Um, but at some point, then we did arrive at what became part of the book finally. Um, then I'll briefly take you through the making of images, and the this particular window will give you a clue into how I might do my other work as well. Um, so we first did this like a rough storyboard kind of thing where we figured out in what order, in what sequence would things appear, and what exactly are we showing there, and do we have enough scientific data, do we have enough visual references to be able to you know, talk about that, or do we need to find some more references or change the case that we are talking about? We knew that the kind of stories we wanted to tell, we needed a rich diversity, both in case of animals and also in terms of the cellular biology or the molecular biology, we get to talk about. Um, okay, I am again back to the same problem. Um, All right. I'm
Yes.
sorry to
The
the audience
transition.
for this, yeah, this interruption, but bear with me, I guess. Um, guess yeah.
Yes. It's okay.
Um, Right. So once we had these kind of storyboards, we looked at the images that were available in literature that would give us clues as to what are we trying to show here. And once that we figured out the visual references and the scientific data, I made a lot of rough sketches with a lot of annotations, a lot of notes, and did a lot of iterations of them to figure out how to simplify them, how to remove excess information that is not necessarily required to understand this process, while it might still be a detail of this and would mean scientifically accurate. But I had to keep a balance between the idea of being able to tell what I want to tell clearly. So this balance between clarity and accuracy is something that I dealt with constantly and deal with constantly in some of my other work. So something that started from here, ended up and went through this process of iterations and thinking and figuring things out, ended up here. And what also helped during this entire process was that I was doing this in a lab, and I had lab mates around who I would present this work in lab meetings, and this work would receive the same kind of critique, same kind of attention that any other, Western blot or PCR or genome sequencing based experiment would. So there were a lot of discussions, a lot of feedback that helped me improve the images in terms of their clarity, in terms of their aesthetics, and so on. So with respect to visuals, I made a lot of choices. Some of them I mentioned here, which might be useful in a discussion like this. I already mentioned this balance of clarity versus accuracy. Then I also had to make stylistic choice into how this book would look. And I had to find something that would work consistently across the examples that we share in the entire book. So which means that I had to figure out a simple code, a visual code, like this is how I'm going to show skin, this is how I'm going to show cells, this is how I'm going to show molecules, and so on, and give them this kind of consistency so that even if you're looking at something in some other segment and it comes back again, you are able to correlate between the two and so on. or at least there was an attempt to do so. We had to, of course, as part of style, also identify color palette. That's something that's also changed thrice during this entire process of making a book. So you can imagine the number of drawings I made. And the other thing we did was to make these images hopefully in an accessible way. The idea was for us to try and not make it look like a textbook or a reference book. I personally actually wanted to give it a feel that it feels like anyone can draw it. And I think I've been able to do that. Right. Then making of the words. So it's a science picture book which has a combination of words and images. And that also took us some time to figure out. So in our initial iteration, we wrote a lot, and in our minds, our writing was poetic and so on. But soon, from the feedback around, we realized that, well, to us, the writing may have been interesting. It was not clear. People were not getting the message that we were trying to give. So then we had to go back to sort of go back to the basics and figure out what it is that we are trying to do. Are we trying to, um, you know, fulfill our creative potential or connect with the audience? And once we were sure that we're connecting with the audience, the choices kind of became more obvious. So we then decided to use three instruments in the lab, something that one might find in a lab that works on color. uh, you know, uh, uh, you know, uh, uh, Sorry, some notification from Zoom just got me distracted. So yeah, so we decided to use these three characters that one might find in a lab that works on biology of color or science of color, really. And that also allowed us to work with this idea of scale. So because our book takes you across scale, we go from top of the animal to the inside of the animal across multiple scales. We show you the skin, we show you the cell, we show you what's inside the cell. And that process of going across the scales meant that we are working with different kinds of instruments at different points, and having these three characters also kind of made that connection easier for us while writing. So now this is how, a typical spread in the book would look like. There's the camera talking, the binocular talking, or the microscope talking, and the events are happening at the back on the image. And the way we also tried to work here with the text and image was that we tried to reduce the redundancy. So what you see on the image is not necessarily described in very many words in the text. So the idea is to keep the text and the image interacting with each other. To, if I've already written something in the words, that doesn't necessarily appear on the image, and vice versa. And because the characters are talking to each other while looking at this, so the book happens like these three characters are looking at whatever is happening, whatever you are looking at. So that conversation also gave us the opportunity to ask questions which the reader might feel that they are also thinking about or interacting with. um, right. Okay, great. um, yeah, so this is like just demonstrating the idea of going across scales. um, right. And then there were right. And then there were a lot of other things that we wanted to include in the book, but because our stories had to go in a particular flow and they had a particular sense and of consistency, we decided to actually create another segment, which we call Color Curiosities, which is a set of question and answers which are not driven by the characters of the book. And we tell you some things, and we also give additional QR code, which are actually there throughout the book. So the QR codes are links to other reading materials and other sources where you can read about that particular idea or topic. Right. Um, right. So these were some of the choices we made with respect to the text. The text is absolutely, not absolutely, it tries to be mostly jargon free. And even if we have used terms, we try to describe it. And even when that term comes again, even if we don't describe it completely, we give you enough context to understand that term without necessarily having to go back to that definition wherever it was present earlier. And the narration is concept centric, and as I already spoke about, it happens like runs like a conversation, and also has like our sense of humor incorporated into it. And already mentioned that the words complement the image and are not redundant with it. So yeah, so then this is what finally came out, this book. Um, some of the cool things about the book are that it doesn't say biology necessarily. There's a lot of physics, there's some chemistry, and a lot of other sort of ideas, other fields incorporated into it. So when you read you feel like you're reading a holistic idea. It's not just divided into silos, like here is a biology chapter, or here is a chemistry chapter, or here's a physics of color chapter, or so on. It works across a scale, and the scale ranges from a coin to a Mount Everest. So that's the spectrum of the scale we cover in the book. Because the instruments are the characters in the book, we think it's an ode to them. And there are a lot of interspersed QR codes, which hope to provoke or rather satisfy your curiosity if your neurons are triggered and you want to read more. How has it been received? We have had mostly great feedback from fellow scientists, science communicators, and a lot of parents. So a lot of parents have written to us, or shared on social media or other platforms about how their kids love the book, and that it sparked curiosity in them, and the idea that it's light, it doesn't feel very heavy, but still explains a lot. So that those are the kind of things that we really did set out to do, or were hoping, like figured out that that's what the kind of work we want to do. So to hear that as a feedback that we were actually able to do that has been really great. The other thing that we've been able to do with the book is that now that we have done a lot of research and into the idea of color in animals, we did a lot of work into making this book. We've also been using this book for outreach events. So far, one online and only one offline, but hoping that that changes with time, and we are also able to do more offline events with this. Right. So this is something that I did with younger kids, where we discuss color through a lot of art activities that were derived from the context that are present in the book. Right. And this is where you can find the book. If you're in India, if you're in US or UK or some other part of the world, you can easily find it on Amazon. The book's title is actually Colors Speak. With that, I would like to thank you for your attention, and bearing with me with respect to how the slide changes went. And I want to just keep this session more open and interactive, and hoping that you have questions to ask and things to say at this moment. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you, Ipsa, for that wonderful talk. So if participants, you have questions, please use the chat box. And I would love to ask you something, like, do you think the idea of science art and science illustration, it's not something that we are really taught in schools and undergraduate, and the fact that the world of science is so colorful and it's beautiful, we don't usually see it that way. Like, I studied biology, we had to draw a lot, but I don't think we ever tried to find the beauty in the subject. We were just drawing, and it was more of a chore. So maybe do you think bringing science art into undergraduate curriculums, school curriculums, would change our perspective of the way we look at science, or the way?
Right. Yeah. Okay, thank you for that question. So it's something that I have deliberated on, not very recently, but a while back. And my understanding is, or at least my very personal, of course, feeling is that though that activity itself, the drawing of the specimen, the looking through the microscope and figuring it out. I think that activity is very important. And I mean, uh, when I reflect on it, like what made it possible for me to do the kind of work I do now, I think those activities were very relevant and very. So I think the idea that it's a chore that has to change. So you already have something that brings art and science together, or at least drawing and science together. And the idea of observation, which is very, very important in both art and science, directly in that activity of drawing from specimens. Um, yeah, but just how we think about them, how it becomes a load during our education, sort of experience. That is what needs to change. Maybe we can present it or do that in a more spirited, more fun manner, but then entirely that depends on the environment that the instructor or the facilitator in that classroom or the teacher in the classroom creates. So rather than depending on a curriculum, I think we could think about training teachers or figuring out some, related activities, or just framing them in a way that makes it interesting for students to engage with it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I hope more and more students don't find it a chore the way maybe we
Yeah.
did. Yeah.
So I have had the good opportunity of, working with at least some colleges in Delhi University. So that's where I did my, undergrads and postgrads. And so because of that, I have had some interactions with students there, with, like classical zoology course students there, where the act of drawing from specimen or reference books is still very much a part of the curriculum. And in the workshops I've done with them, we do try to make it fun. Like, so you look at the poster, sorry, you look at the specimen, and then maybe you have to make a poster with it, or you look at the specimen and then you have to make a comics with
Were
it or
you like
something like
looking
that.
at those preserved specimens, right? And
Yes, yes.
okay,
Yeah,
right.
yeah. So look at the museum specimen. You still have to do the observation. You still have to understand what they are, but like what the output is, at least in the workshops, can be different. I mean, of course, drawing them properly for the practical course is also a worthwhile activity, and of course, is the course requirement. But then maybe once in a while, interspersing it with like some fun activity. Like I remember in one of my workshops, some students wrote poems about them, and
Oh,
uh, and then just drew patterns with them, and they so juxtapose those patterns and poems together. So those kind of things can definitely sort of help students engage with the museum and the idea of observation and observation based drawing, and then hopefully that stays with them as a science and art combination.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
seems so interesting. The
Mm.
poem part of it, poem aspect of it. I wish we had such classes in our undergraduate.
Yeah.
So Shaunak is asking a question. Okay, he says, "Congratulations on writing the book. It's impressive work. And what are the few of the challenges that you stumbled upon during writing?"
Right. Thanks, Shaunak, both for the compliment and the question. Writing, in fact, was actually the most difficult process for us while working on it. So when we started working on it, because we came fresh from the research phase where we had read like umpteen number of books and umpteen number of papers, I particularly had this compulsive need where I felt like the words have to justify everything that we've read or everything we know and so on. So our biases were the initial sort of challenges. And then when we started writing in the prose style, we wrote a lot. And again, we were trying to figure out how to tell the most accurately, in the scientific sense. Like the experience we came from was having, written scientific papers where you carefully consider what you're saying with your words in to the minutest way, and we were trying to find words that leave no room for interpretations. I think that would be the better way to put it. And that really led us to a very weird space where no one understood what we were saying. So that totally did not work for us. And even when we figured out that the three characters would have conversations to talk about the science, then the first few things were for us was to figure out, which character could uh, be assigned what properties, which character to make it more humorous, which character to make it more curious, which character could be more subtle or sassy. And so we had to figure some characteristics out for them, which may or may not be necessarily obvious on the first reading, but if you pay attention, you'll realize that the characters have their own way of thinking or saying. There are some words or the way they say things, or that are peculiar to them. So we had to kind of develop characters in some sense in its entirety. So that was also something that, so when we figured that out, but to keep that consistent across the chapters, that was a lot of work, because sometimes to make the concept clear, maybe we needed a certain flow, but then that broke the character. So we had to figure out how to maintain that. So that was one thing. And then because we, sort of, once we started writing in that character way, we knew that we also wanted to keep it as jargon free as possible, because we realized that our first attempt at writing was very heavy. And so, we wanted to keep it light. So if you want to make it jargon free, you really have to figure out how to talk about things without necessarily invoking their complicated, technical names and so on. So that was also some kind of hard work, and but that was very useful hard work, I would really say. That exercise, I think, has helped me a lot, even in all the other works that I do. Yeah, so those are the kind of challenges that we saw. And then, of course, once we had written up most of it and had done various iterations ourselves, then because, as it happens that when you are looking at something for so long, you might not see the gaps that there were. So we had the great pleasure of working with Somdata, who is also a science communications professional, work with us to edit our book and help us realize where the gaps were and plug it, and so plug them and so on. So yeah, a lot of hard work went into writing. Yeah.
Thanks for that answer. And Shanchari is asking a question. She also has a comment. She says the book seems very interesting. She has a question that is there any scope to explore basic medical urgency and a requirement to handle those urgencies so that a life can be saved? I think she's meaning through sci art or science illustration. So is there a way to address medical emergencies?
Okay, thanks, Sanchai, for this question. I'm not sure I fully understand that question or the scope of this question. So I'm just going to say that there is an entire field that is dedicated to medicine and visualization, both at the level of education and also the level of communication. If you want to look up, you can look up medical illustrations and graphic medicine. So there is a lot of work that happens there. I personally don't do that kind of work. That's all I can possibly say about this field at the moment, because I don't necessarily understand the scope of your question. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Ipsa. We have a question from our host today, Sundaram. He says that it was an amazing talk. It really was. And recently he got an opportunity to read a book, and he's thanking you for writing such thought-provoking one. And he wonders that whether, as we know, the perception of colors that has evolved across the phylogenetic tree, and what about connecting the evolution of color perception by different organisms? Is there, do you have any thoughts in this regard?
Right. Yeah. Thanks for reading the book, your comments, and then your questions. So actually, it is a part of things that we thought we wanted to explore, but we couldn't. So even when we talk about color in this current book, so if you think about color is a visual signal. You take it, you behave accordingly. And so the part that we have talked about is mainly at the skin level, like what's happening at the skin. We don't talk so much about what happens at the eye. We don't talk so much about what happens in the brain and so on. So that's the part of this entire sort of signaling that we have not necessarily covered at all. And we just mentioned to like some parts of it in our color curiosity segment. I mean, I don't know if we will, sort of continue work, make more sort of books in this series necessarily. Don't know if we have the kind of time and bandwidth, but if we do, then something like color perception or processing of color signal in brain would definitely be some of the things that we might consider. Yeah.
Thank you, Ipsa. And Krishnamurti is asking, great talk, looking forward to reading the book. And I was wondering if you could comment on this, like in today's world, how should one proceed to make a career in science communication? Does having a PhD provide an advantage? And should one think of such a career, such career options from graduation or during postgrad?
All right. So I'm going to start from your bottom question first, Krishnamurti. So, um, you don't necessarily have to start thinking about this career or any career since your graduation or your post-graduation, in the sense that, like I wanted to be a scientist since 8th grade. And I mean, I am still very much technically a scientist, but I don't do that work anymore. So my point being that it's, whenever you want to just change your mind, like if you, and it can be today or it can be tomorrow, or maybe it was somewhere when you were doing postgrads or your grads, and it doesn't matter when you start thinking about this as a career. It doesn't change your capacity to do it or not do it. You will still have to put in hard work to become a science communicator. And is PhD helpful? PhD is not an essential requirement to be a science communicator. But if you're in India and you're looking for jobs in India, a lot of science communication jobs, not a lot, I mean, there are anyways a handful of jobs, but most of them, if not all of them, do require, at least at the moment, PhD, as a sort of bare minimum qualification. It's not like having a PhD makes you a better science communicator. It doesn't mean that at all. How to proceed to make a career. So there are many ways that you could start thinking about that. You can either do a professional course in science communication. Unfortunately, in India, we don't have a lot of them, or really any of them. But if you wanted, you could go abroad and learn that. And even in science communication, there's a whole spectrum of skills that are required. There are people who write, there are people who do podcasts, there are people who do science, public engagement, or things like that. Like there are a lot of avenues. You could figure out what avenue suits you the most, and then like on your own, you could build your skill set in that avenue. So like, for example, I started as an illustrator, so then I did like learn illustration on my own. So that's one way, but then that doesn't make you a science communicator. That only means that you get to acquire some skills. And then to do the things that a science communicator does in that case, you just have to grab any opportunity you can, and then make your own work or work with someone to just build on your portfolio. And experience is really useful in being a science communicator, especially if you are coming from a scientific training, because I think scientists can be too much about science in their head. And I think science communicator or a public engagement professional has to think about the audience before they think about the science. And that's the kind of sort of brain switch takes a lot of experience. You need to experience that, and then you get that brain switch if you don't have that automatically in you, or if you haven't trained as a science communicator. So I think that comes with experience. So do some internship or volunteer work or something that like takes you there, and then you can start doing it professionally. Yeah.
Thank you. That was really helpful for, I think, anybody who's listening and who wants to be in this career. And there's a related question. We have a question from YouTube. This question is from Ohitogni Roy Chaudhuri.
Hmm.
Uh, Thank you for the wonderful presentation. I want to ask, as an illustrator, how do I start getting in the flow of science illustration, like approaching people, universities, or
Hmm.
how do we start working with them? Or do we join workshops? And
Hmm.
this is kind of related, but yeah.
Yeah. Sorry if I missed the name, but so if you're already an illustrator or somebody who has that skill set, um, I think you could always start by reaching out to scientists and science institutes yeah, around you, like locally, if, um, wherever you are. If you are yourself a scientist or a science student, then starting with your university or your institute would be a great way. Like my first few gigs also came from people around me. So offer to do things that you may not necessarily want to do. I mean, but help you build your skills. For example, initially, what the kind of work that you would most likely easily get is like making posters for conferences and talks and such like things like that are not necessarily science illustration work or more graphic design work, but then it helps you sort of build a bunch of interactions and a body of work where you know that you can work with scientists, you understand their language, they understand you, and you have figured out your functional ways of working together and your processes and all of that. And especially if you're working with scientists, it's not same as working with any sort of, let's say, marketing agency or any other such professional agencies, because scientists not do not necessarily know how to work with illustrators, for example. So so it's a bit of a learning for anyone who's trying to do that. And so yeah, look around locally, and if you're just asking about skill sets, then of course any kind of illustration sets are useful, skill sets are useful. But if you think that you want to be inclined towards science, then I would say you can either start by reproducing like old masterpieces, like one starts as a, how one trains in fine art schools. You start by looking at Leonardo's work, or or some other natural history illustrators' work, and you start by sort of copying it and figuring out what are the processes they used. Can you use them in your own life? Can you practice? I mean, apart from copying, let's say they made observation-based drawings. Can you go out and make observation-based drawings and present them in the way that they did? Maybe things, just to try things like that, and see what works for you. And the other way would be to look, of course, on the whole World Wide Web and look for other contemporary science illustrators, talk to them, and see if some of them might be okay working with you as an intern. So especially if you have some body of work, illustration work, even if not science illustration work behind you. So yeah, you can explore something like that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that answer. And I just have a question, like science communication, science illustration, it's all referred to as the alternative career in sciences.
Hmm.
And it's as if there is a main career and there's an
Mhm.
alternative. And
Mm.
how do you feel about that? And do you think that
And
needs to change a bit?
yes, so maybe when I was younger, and maybe it bothered me a little bit, but I'm right now I'm like whoever cares, like you do what you want to do, like the labels don't matter, like I don't care.
The labels, yeah. So
Yeah. And
it's
so
it's
somebody thinks that I'm an alternative careerist. I don't care. I'm happy doing what I'm doing. I think it's cool. Take that. you know. So yeah, like I'm not worried about if somebody thinks that you should be in science or you should have continued with science. Like, oh yeah, I don't care about what you think.
and that's how I guess uh, you're going to inspire others. Yes. And Shonok is asking another question. So, do you host any science illustration workshop, or do you teach researchers? And how do you work with other scientists to help them communicate their science efficiently?
Right. So Shaunak, I do actually take a lot of workshops. So if you're interested in workshops, I do, then I think the best place would be Instagram. I share them on my stories. And if or you can follow me on Twitter as well. Sometimes share my talks there as well. Talks or workshops there as well. Mostly this year I'm doing workshops in sort of collaborations with other institutes, which may not be open to everyone. But there are, in past, I've done some workshops with like Ipsa Pune. So they do it for like, they open the applications for anyone and everyone who might want to come in and do those. I'm not in talks with them for any such workshop in the near future, but in future, of course, that's a possibility because I worked with them several times. And even sometimes I do things on my own as well. If I'm in that mood, I'll just suddenly decide, okay, next month, I'm going to just do a workshop. Whoever wants to join can join. And the one platform that you can definitely look out for is Cyrio. So Cyrio is a platform that tries to bring science communicators together. And they do, I think, 2 times in a year workshops with different science communicators. It's a paid workshop. It's online. And you can decide if you want to do the whole course or just one workshop based on your preferences. So that's something that you can definitely keep an eye on. Yeah. About your second question, do I work with scientists? Yes, I do work with scientists to communicate their science efficiently. Is a word I'm not sure if I want to use necessarily here. If you go to CCMB's website, CiteIs, you will see that there are a lot of zines by other artists as well as me that communicate the science that's been done at CCMB. So that's one good example. I've also done a lot of videos with CCMB, which are on their YouTube channel. Then a lot of scientist work tends to be sometimes for communication within the scientific domain and not necessarily, for a wider audience. So, like for the research talks or for their posters or for their grant applications and so on. So a lot of work I do with scientists, or rather used to do with scientists, is also in that direction. This year, however, I'm mostly doing some personal work, and I hope I'll be able to share some of it fairly soon. Yeah.
Yeah, and we are looking forward to it. And it's great that you mentioned Cyrio, because we hosted Suchita Champak as a part of our panel in 2021. So it was great meeting her, and they're doing such great work in SciComm right now. So, so with that, I guess we have covered all our questions, and thank you so much for being here. Thank you for answering all these questions. It was such an illuminating talk, and I guess this talk is inspiring more people to think about sci art, to look at illustrations in science in a different way. And personally, I'm looking forward to reading your book.
If that's okay with you, I'm just going to share the link to my book in case somebody wants to pick it for themselves or kids around in their family or their friend.
Please check out this link and buy the book, gift it to your friends, because science art is it's actually the science art shows how beautiful science is, right? And if we stop looking at the beauty of science, we kind of if you don't enjoy it anymore, then what is the point of doing science?
True that. I mean, that's what made me quit science.
So thank you so much, Ipsa, for being here. And thank you everyone who joined here today. We apologize again for all the technical issues we faced and the fact that we started late today. And we'll be back again with another talk. Please keep looking at our social media. Thank you from Team Biologically Speaking.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for listening in. Yeah.
So with that, we come to the end of our session. Thank you everyone for being here.